Good morning, basketball fans. Welcome to another edition of the Upstate Hoops Podcast. I'm Jim Sinacropi inside the FingerLakes1.com studios on the third floor of the North Park building in Seneca Falls, New York on Sunday, December 8th, 2019. And we got a good show this week. We're going to give our first impressions as all these local Wayne Finger Lakes teams have hit the court and we've had some action. Finally can kind of evaluate what we're seeing and, give our first impressions of which teams we think might be sectional contenders or league title contenders. Updated power rankings, of course, for the boys and girls. A lot of change on both sides. And we're going to take a look at sectional classifications. They've been posted, and we'll see. There haven't been too many changes, but a few changes of note. So good show. Glad you could wake up with me early on a Sunday morning, and we'll talk high school basketball for the next 60 minutes. The Upstate Hoops Podcast and all our coverage of Wayne Finger Lakes High School basketball is brought to you thanks to the support of Generations Bank, celebrating 150 years of serving and supporting our hometowns. Visit mygenbank.com for the best choices in checking, savings, home equities, mortgages, and much more. Generations has been the Finger Lakes Bank since 1870. Generations Bank, member FDIC. And by Little John Orthodontics. Dr. Rod Littlejohn and Dr. Liz Barbie are proud to support our area high school athletes. Check out Dr. Rod and Dr. Liz online at littlejohnortho.com. And Bill Cram Chevrolet. All roads lead to Bill Cram Chevrolet on 5 and 20 between Seneca Falls and Waterloo. Browse their full inventory of new and used vehicles at billcramchevrolet.com. And by DeSanto Propane. Since 1939, the difference has been DeSanto Propane. So we're off and running. Last time I was here in studio with you guys was 2 weeks ago. Since then, we live streamed a pair of girls' games from South Seneca. And then this week, on Thursday night, we saw a heck of a game between Waterloo and Newark in Newark, and we also streamed Canandaigua Victor. And since then, last night, they played the final round of that tournament. We weren't there for that, but Victor beat Newark, and Canandaigua beat Waterloo. But let's take a look at all the action so far, some games to note. Going way back to November 26th when the Romulus Warriors really took it to Marion in Romulus. They beat them 77-30. That was, I remember Romulus being one of the only Class D schools, in the Wayne Finger Lakes. Keep an eye on them as maybe able to put together a run this year. Marion, not too strong out of Wayne County, but a 47-point win for the Warriors to open up their season. And then, you never know what you're going to get from East Rochester. On that same night, they beat HAC out of the FL West, but 47-46. So normally you'd think that might be a bigger margin, but they got their first win. And then, here's where things get a little interesting is where now, Romulus beat Marion by 47 out of Wayne County, and then they hosted Clyde Savannah out of Wayne County, a school that was a little down last year compared to their normal standards in Clyde. But Clyde took care of them 67-45, and so Clyde's season's off and running. Marcus Whitman's a team we're looking at a lot this year, playing independent, not in the Finger Lakes West this year. But they opened up their season against a good Calmum team in Rushville and win 73-64. East Rochester also back in action against C.G. Finney. Might remember C.G. Finney. Last time we saw him on Finger Lakes 1 was in Newark, when they played Lions in the state playing round, and just a fantastic basketball game. They lost a lot, but they still have that 8th grader, Marcus Robinson, who's now a 9th grader, on the team. But East Rochester was able to handle them 77-65, thanks in part by Chuck Dom's 34 points and John Birkin's 18 points on 6 3-pointers. So we're going to get a look at East Rochester Wednesday night at the Atwood. We're going to stream that East Rochester Lions game live on FL1 Sports on Wednesday night. I'll be there with Kevin Sharp. Rush Henrietta, we're going to try to take a little closer attention to maybe Victor and Canandaigua this year, but specifically Victor. They opened up their season with a 63-50 win against Rush Henrietta. And, Victor, this is a double-A school, obviously an incredible boys lacrosse program and solid across most of their sports, but traditionally, basketball-wise, even going back to the days when they were in the Finger Lakes East, that program not on par with some of the other state-level programs at Victor that has just an outstanding athletic department. And but they do beat Rush Henrietta to start their season off with a win. And then we'll move ahead to December 3rd. There's a pretty full slate of games on December 3rd. And Red Jacket hosted HAC and won 74-41 behind Matt Records 27. And Red Jacket's a team, might remember, they fell in the Blue Cross Arena in the C2 or C3, was it? Championship game to Lions, but really looked impressive. I can't wait to see this team, in person this year. The favorites, obviously, to win the Finger Lakes West, especially with Whitman out of there playing an independent schedule. But I have to wonder, if Whitman was still in the West this year, I can't fully say that they would have won their 5th straight league title with this Red Jacket team that looks just great here to start the season. Naples came to Ovid to visit South Seneca, and South Seneca came out with a 62-56 win, looking for maybe some contenders in the West that might step up and challenge HAC or challenge Red Jacket this year in the West. And then we had, speaking of West, Honeoye beat Bloomfield 50-45, and that's always a fun matchup when those two schools get together. A little rivalry action going on there. And then you had Lions. They opened up their season real early on November 22nd, beating HAC pretty badly. And Sodus was another team in the Wayne County leagues that I thought perhaps might be able to give Lions trouble. We're heavily favoring Lions in Wayne County this year, and really disappointing result for Sodus. Lions win 70-46. Justin Tootie Smith led the way with 15 points there. Amir James had 11. And then Minders and Whitman squared off. Now, you remember we really hyped that game last year when Whitman came to Seneca Falls, and Minders really took care of them pretty easy. They're going to play twice this year, the first of which happened on December 3rd last week, and Whitman came out with a 45-34 win. Connor Tomian, I believe Connor's a sophomore now, 15 points. Liam Pendergrass, senior, big man, 12 points. And I'm not shocked that Minders lost that game, but I'm kind of shocked that they scored 34 points. That's not a lot of scoring. They did hold Whitman to under 50 with 45, but Whitman comes out with an 11-point win. And so far that independent schedule for Whitman looks to be going okay for him. And we got our first look at Wayne, a whole new look Wayne Eagle team with their top 6 or 7 guys graduated in that group that won 2 sectional titles in 3 years. And they were impressive, defeating Greece Arcadia 53-34. A couple of great guards are going to make this team go this year. Tyler Reynolds had 20 points, and then Blankenberg had 16. Not Logan Blankenberg, but his younger brother Mason Blankenberg. So Bill Thompson's Wayne Eagles might be better than we thought with all those losses. I mean, they did have a great JV team last year, and Reynolds and Blankenberg are 2 of the kids that came up from that team. Moving ahead to the 5th of December. This would be the Thursday night when we were in Newark. And the Mid-Lakes Eagles hit the court. They beat Bloomfield 57-51. And the Penn Yan Mustangs and new head coach Dan Doyle taking over the varsity after manning the JV team last year. They come out with a nice win against Rochester Prep in Penn Yan, 44-25. Brennan Prather had 13 and Dominic Lafferty had 10. Then you had Lions playing Williamson, a much improved Williamson team, as you'll see as we go on here, but still Lions able to come out with an easy 74-53 win on the road. And then this one shocked me a little bit. I mentioned Sodus was going to potentially be one of those teams that might be able to contend with Lions, but how about North Rose Wolcott? Behind Quentin Norris, defeating Sodus in North Rose, 47-43. And then we had a big rivalry game, early season rivalry game in Wayne County with East Rochester and Gananda. At East Rochester and Gananda, all over them, 64-48. So, we're going to get a look at East Rochester Wednesday, and we're going to see at that point, what they have, but just by these results, so a little disappointing early season start. We know what Gananda's bringing to the table. I'm not surprised that they would win, but the margin of that win, along with the other losses that East Rochester suffered so far early in the season, looks like it might be a long season for the Bombers. And then we had Whitman facing World of Inquiry. They're going to play a lot of strange teams this year. They're going to play Lions twice. I know that. I know they're going to play Minders again. So they've been scheduling a lot of they have to fill their schedule without the league schedule. But they beat World of Inquiry easily 69-50. So Whitman off to a great start. And then Clyde Savannah hosts South Seneca. Comes out with a 64-40 win. They're 3-0 to start their season. And Cam Chance with 22. McKinney with 15. And D'Amato hits 3 3-pointers. So I can't wait to see Clyde. I mean, we're definitely going to get Clyde Lions, one of those two games, live on Finger Lakes 1 this year. And last year we chose not to do either one because it was let's just say the spread was off the books on those games. We kind of knew that it was going to be one-sided. This year, maybe not. We might have something. It would be an upset still, I think, if Clyde was to beat Lions in either of those games. But, I think they certainly have a shot at it. And then the games that were in Newark on Thursday night. Pretty neat tournament. Finger Lakes Tip-Off Classic, raising money for charity, but it brings in two former Finger Lakes East teams to play, two current Finger Lakes with two other Finger Lakes East teams. Currently, Newark, Waterloo, Canandaigua, Victor. And that first game, Canandaigua, Victor, was all Victor. Of course, they have a 7'1" Connor Williams. Didn't have the greatest game, but also probably didn't log the minutes that he would in a more competitive game as Victor just ran away. But Matt Caggiano, the point guard, super impressive. CJ James transferred from Greece Olympia, had a nice dunk, and it's going to be fun to see if Victor, how they'll stack up in the Monroe League against the other AA competition. But sectional contender this year, I would say for sure. And I think overall the AA classification might be a little bit down from what it normally is in Section 5 this year. So that'll be interesting to see. But the marquee game of the night for us was Waterloo Newark, 1 and 2 in our power rankings, our preseason power rankings. Waterloo 1, Newark 2. And by the end of that game, when Newark had control, the student section was chanting, "We're number 1," letting us know that we might have got that one wrong. But it was a great ball game. And when I look at, we'll start with Newark. When I look at Newark, and every year teams lose players to graduation, most every team, and it seems like, oh, they're going to be a little bit down, but you don't know until you see the new kids that are taking their place. And the most impressive things with Newark, I was impressed with Dustin Case, who handled a little bit of the point guard duty, a little bit at number 2 while Josh Green ran the point. He was solid, knocked down a couple threes, and Devin Augusto, really solid on the boards, in the paint. Didn't look for a shot a lot, but I think he's probably the kid that you could look to as the leader of that team. He's going to have some big games. He had a really nice move, the left foul line elbow where he caught it, turned around, and knocked down a little 10-foot jumper. He's going to be great this year. Josh Green, kind of not the best year last year, came to play this year, man. First of all, he's handling the point guard duty at 6'4", but all over the glass, really under control out there. Solid game for Josh Green. I think he finished with 16 points. Isaiah Camp is a kid that is going to be tough inside for Newark. Really strong on the glass, and Newark just dominated Waterloo on the glass. I mean, absolutely dominated. Second and third and sometimes fourth chances on offense where they're just leaping over the Waterloo players and eventually putting it in the basket. A lot of that, I think, was Waterloo kind of was standing there watching, and a lot of it is just physical dominance, bigger and stronger. But our player of the game that day was a kid named Rayshawn Howard. He had 18 points as a freshman in his varsity debut. Now, a lot of folks that follow youth and travel basketball knew who this kid was. I even had a funny picture sent to me. One of my friends, it was a 7th grade travel game, and it showed Rayshawn with his son, who was a good player. But he came up to Rayshawn's waist. Here's a kid that dunked in a 7th grade travel game before, and he threw one down on a breakaway Thursday night in Newark. But man, he's handles the ball with both hands. Jump out of the gym, super long. I mean, you talk about these guys, how tall they are, but then how long are they? How long are their arms? Because you can add a few inches to your overall height, I suppose, when your arms are that long. And this kid is just a freshman, is going to be spectacular throughout his high school career. And talking to him in the postgame show, such a good-natured kid, seems to be having fun, a lot of respect for his teammates, and going to really look forward to watching Rayshawn Howard over the next 4 years. And this year, he is a key component as a freshman for the Henry Caparis's Newark Reds for sure. And then on the other side, Waterloo, it's easy to come in here and say, oh, man, we got Waterloo wrong. We had them number 1 in our preseason power rankings, but they were right there. Newark dominated the game, from the eye test, but Newark made 12 or 13 three-pointers and were right there, one possession game at the end. Came on late. They were down 9 points with 58 seconds left, cut it to 3. Carter Steve comes off the bench to make a big free throw to kind of seal it. But, got to hand it to Waterloo. They certainly didn't quit. And they got a deep bench, a lot of guys that can hit threes, a lot of solid players. But they were exposed, by Newark's height and athleticism inside. They need to do something to get rebounds. They're going to play Newark again later this year, and they were not going to be able to beat them unless they can get rebounds. Doesn't matter how many threes you made. I mean, next time, if they didn't make 13 threes, 12 or 13, whatever it was, they probably would have lost by 15 points. But that's, what Tim Darnell taking over the helm in Waterloo, tightened up the ship a little bit, I think. But they're going to have to do more than hit the threes if they're going to compete for that Finger Lakes East title, or more importantly, a sectional title in B1, something that they haven't won in Waterloo since 1972. So I thought, obviously, as a number one ranked team in our power rankings, that this Waterloo squad would be a sectional contender, and I still think they are, but they have a lot of improvement to do if they're going to be that caliber of a team. And Kevin Korzaneski, my broadcast partner Thursday night, said that he thought Julian Ruiz was candidate for Finger Lakes East Player of the Year, maybe a front runner. And I'd agree. Ruiz is tough. Made some questionable decisions, I suppose, at some key times in that game. But first game of the year. But what I gotta say, kudos to both student sections and both fan bases who came out and filled that gym for an early December game that had the feel of a big time February game. I mean, that gym was packed almost to capacity, and it was just great. And it's so much fun, so much more fun to go to a high school gym with that type of atmosphere, not only just to call the game for Finger Lakes 1, but to just watch the game as a fan. I mean, there's nothing better. And so both schools delivered on that front, and it was a really great night in Newark Thursday night. Now, we'll get to the Saturday results. Last night, what happened in the second round of that game, but let me just keep on moving on down the line here with some more scores. We had, on December 6th, Honeoye beat Lima Christian 67-41. And then we got our first look at the Geneva Panthers with new head coach Matt Desring. And when we opened up our Upstate Hoops podcast season 2 weeks ago, I got a lot of feedback from Geneva folks who were not happy that maybe they weren't ranked higher in the power rankings, or they didn't talk about some of the juniors coming up from JVs. A really good JV team last year. But I got to tell you, I don't have a lot to work from early in the year. So, we're going to miss some things, and we can only talk about the information we have. And the more we see teams, the more we can better, evaluate and discuss them. But 68-50 win for Geneva over Greece Olympia. Great way to start their season. And one of those juniors, Devin Martin, 21 points, 13 rebounds. So we have all those returning guards, whether it be Jagger Kerr, Liam Ryan, Parker Bossard, and then we are throwing into the mix these kids that came up from the JV team. Mentioned Devin Martin, but they also Nasir Harrison, 6 foot guard forward. I mean, he's only 6 foot, but he's going to play more of a power forward type role. Tailback for the football team. And those two additions really round out a really solid Geneva club, who Coach Desring said he's changing a little bit of the style that Brian Miller played over the past several seasons, style that did win him a sectional title in Class A2 in 2014, I'm thinking it was. But he's hoping to get it up and down a little bit more. Told his team he wants 70 shots a game. So they'll be fun to watch at their new gym in Geneva in the Panther Den, and we're going to try to get out there and take a look at them for sure this year. East Rochester back on the court against Bloomfield. Now, who do you think won that game? Traditionally over the past few years, you'd think that would be a sleeper maybe for East Rochester, but Bloomfield behind 16 points from Adam Sheehan with a 51-41 win over East Rochester, and I'm starting to be a little concerned about our trip to the Atwood on Wednesday, but we'll see. See what East Rochester team shows up there, and it'll be our first look at the Lions, of course, on Finger Lakes 1 this year. Penn Yan with a 3-point loss to Virtus last night, 59-56. Now, this is a Penn Yan team that we haven't talked much about because it's a whole new look team. New head coach Dan Doyle likes the group. They come to play. They're going to get better as the season goes on. We're going to try to get a look at Penn Yan on Finger Lakes 1 this year. Nothing wrong with going on the road and losing by 3 points to Virtus, who's an A2 school, when you're Penn Yan, a B2 school. So looking forward to see what the Mustangs have on the boys' side this year for sure. And then South Seneca and Sodus in action at Sodus, and now this result makes a little more sense to me from Sodus. 52-39, they win. And then Palmac traveled to Williamson, a little Northwest Wayne County rivalry game there, but Williamson, a program that's been really down over the past 5-10 years. Palmac was in the Blue Cross Arena as recently as 4 years ago. Palmac holds off a 55-52 win at Williamson, so that I don't know what to make about that. Like I say, I know Williamson is much improved, but usually a Finger Lakes East team going to a place like Williamson would be an easy win, but this wasn't an easy win. And in fact, Williamson had the ball with a chance to tie at the end, but nonetheless, Palmac gets the win. And then we go to the second day of the Finger Lakes Tip-Off Classic in Newark, and right off the bat, shocking result comes through. Canandaigua, who did not look very good against Victor at all, defeats Waterloo 61-48. So Waterloo goes 0-2 off the bat in Newark to open up their season after being number one preseason in our power rankings. And, could give them a pass maybe for that Newark loss, but I was shocked that they lost to Canandaigua. Not taking anything away from Canandaigua. I know that when we saw them play against Victor, maybe there is a huge difference in overall talent there. But, Ryan Welch is a solid player. Canandaigua brings some solid players to the table. They're going to probably struggle in their league. But here they come and get a win from a former Finger Lakes East rival in Waterloo, and Waterloo starts 0-2 in Victor, and then are in Newark. Then Newark in the championship game, and Victor comes out with a 62-47 win. Not shocked there either. Again, a double-A improved team in Victor. I would have flipped a coin on that one before. I thought Newark might have kept it a little closer, especially at home, but Newark falls to Victor 62-47, and now Newark is 1-1. So that's a look at the boys. Let's kick it over to the girls real quick, going way back to November 27th with East Rochester really showing something here on the girls' side, winning 48-27. Zoe Zoots, 22 points, 17 rebounds, 6 assists. I think that this East Rochester girls team is going to be one to watch this year. And, of course, we were down in South Seneca where we saw Palmac win that tournament. We saw South Seneca go 0-2 with losses to Minders and Weedsport. And then in the finals, Palmac beat Minders. And I really do have to hand it to the Minders team there. I thought they'd be heavily outmatched in that game, and they did ultimately lose the game. But they hung in tight, and after being down 20-2, I think it was, to start the game, they did come back to eventually tie the game. I can't remember if they took the lead, but then Palmac was able to pull away. A couple of girls teams that are on the rise, Romulus and Lions, squared off at the Atwood Gym, and Lions with the 66-54 win. Kiara Reese had 21 for Romulus, and Kaden Crago, 22.7 assists, 9 steals for Lions. And then Waterloo opened up their season, a really good Waterloo girls team, really good Waterloo girls team. They defeated Eugenia Maria 89-8. I don't know how that type of game is going to help you. I don't even know who Eugenia Maria is, but they scored 8 points at Waterloo and lost by 81. Moving forward, still in November, on the 30th, the Red Creek girls were in action with a win over what I think is going to be a pretty good Dundee team, 59-48. They went all the way to Dundee for that one. Izzy Wilbur, 24 points, 12 rebounds. Jenny Easling, 18 points. And so, it looks like Jenny Easling might be one of the a component that will have a little more than just Izzy Wilbur this year in Red Creek. They need more than just one girl, and there's a couple other girls on that team. So this Red Creek team, sectional contenders this year for sure. Mid-Lakes in action for the first time since dropping that state final game last year. Just a great season and a great 2-year run for Nate Rich and the Lady Screaming Eagles, they played up against a Class A Hilton team and lost 49-38 to open their season. And then impressive, speaking of playing against A schools, the Waterloo girls beat East High 47-39. Macy Carr with 12 points. Jasmine Lewis, I believe she's a freshman now. She played varsity as an 8th grader. She had 10. And then a really interesting matchup between Marcus Whitman girls and the Lions girls at Lions. And Whitman comes out with a 58-55 win. This is a really good Whitman girls team this year. They've been building up towards this team for a couple years now. Ari Beverly, 24 points. Maddie Ryan in the middle with 19 points. And so that's a pretty big win for Whitman. The Whitman girls, stepping out of the league to play a really good Lions team. And then we move ahead to December 3rd. Mid-Lakes gets back on the winning track with a 63-40 win over School of the Arts. Kara Walker, 17 points, 12 rebounds. Her sister, Callie Walker, 10 points and 15 rebounds. And then Lydia Day threw in 15 points. So this is a team that's got a new look. It's going to take time, I think, for them. I think they'll improve as the year goes on. And, I think their primary goal would be to win the Finger Lakes East this year, which is going to be a tough task, but also to, win another sectional title, which would be a 3rd straight sectional title. Lena Forbes is moved on along with Macy Kisner, and I think that the Walker girls, especially Kara, who would be the leader of this team for the next 2 years, I would imagine that they've set that goal to capture that 3rd straight sectional title. And I think they can do it. Got to get better as the year goes on and with a new identity, I suppose. Then the Minders girls hosted Aquinas. Aquinas plays a lot of Finger Lakes East teams on their schedule. And this was another, Aquinas opened up a big lead. This Minders girls team, a little short-staffed. I think they only have 8 girls on the roster. Hung in there, came back to get to within 1 possession of Aquinas and ultimately lost 55-48. But Mackenzie Higbee, just a sophomore, 24 points, 6 rebounds. Sydney Haas, just a sophomore, 7.7 rebounds. And this team is going to start 4 sophomores. They lost some of their seniors. Caitlin Korzaneski was going to come back as a starting senior, hurt her knee in lacrosse. And then a couple of her friends decided they weren't going to play. So now all of a sudden this team is super young. Jerry Anderson's Minders girls team is super young, but talented. And the girls that are on this team, those sophomores, man, they work hard, and their basketball is their number 1 sport. They do the travel, they do the open gyms, and this group really does work hard. And I think that they're going to get better and better as the year goes on. And I think that they can compete in B2 for a sectional title. B2 girls. It's right there. We've seen Minders do it before where they struggle in the regular season and then come out of there, with a sectional run. So that could be the case this year, but, a little lacking in size. Their biggest, tallest girl would be a freshman that got brought up in Haley Mosch, who I think she'll get a lot better as the year goes on. I mean, it's a kind of a shock to the system, when you're playing on varsity as a freshman like that. And so you got to get used to the speed and the size and the physicality of it. And I think she will. And I think that Minders girls team will improve as the year goes on. Penyan girls, though, might have been slightly overlooked by us here at Finger Lakes 1 with they beat Pittsford Sutherland 49-41. Dundee on the winning track with a 44-35 win over Twin Tiers. 25 points from Haley Knapp and 13 points, 11 rebounds from Mackenzie Kratsley. December 4th had Red Jacket defeating HAC 58-32 behind 18 points from Sydney Close and 14 from Ashley Reed. The Whitman girls get a league win over Romulus 49-38. Ari Beverly with 16 points and 12 rebounds. Maddie Ryan with 15. Kiara Woody with 16 for Romulus. I like this group of Romulus girls. I think they're going to have a good year. And, of course, I like Bri Parzak's Whitman team as well this year. Bloomfield with a 59-21 win over Campbell Savona. And then the Waterloo girls all over Avon, 68-36. Giovanna White Principio, 19 points. Jillian Panic, 11. Jillian Panic, on varsity since 8th grader. She's a senior now. Tabitha Winter, 10 points. And Giovanna White Principio that I mentioned, bringing a lot of size into the middle of that Waterloo team. I think she was just a 9th grader last year. Now she's a sophomore. I mean, Coach Mike Bree has a lot of talent really deep into their JV program for the girls. It's a testament to, what he's done, from the rec leagues on up. Not only him, but his whole team. And, anytime we see successful high school teams, there's a whole group of volunteer coaches and parents who kind of make it happen. And that's what they got going on in Waterloo. The Waterloo girls program is super strong right now, and they're showing it right out the gate with a couple of nice wins. Red Creek Gananda, big Wayne County girls rivalry. Gananda was the big-time losses to graduation this year, and Red Creek wins 40-29 at Gananda. Izzy Wilbur comes out with a triple-double, 26 points, 10 rebounds, 10 steals. Red Jacket squared off against Mid Lakes. Pretty interesting game there. But Mid Lakes was able to come out with a win, 42-34. 16 points, 15 rebounds from Kara Walker. And J.C. Landon, 13 points. And then you had the Newark girls open up their season against Women Prep. And they come out with a 60-point win. The final, 65-5. South Seneca girls, after really challenging themselves, bringing in bigger schools for their tournament in Weedsport, Penn Yan, and Minders, they go on the road to get their first win of the year against HAC, 40-29. And then Penn Yan and Whitman squared off. Big test for Whitman, but really nice win for Penn Yan, 51-34. Sierra Harrison, 20 points in that one. Gananda took care of East Rochester. So this is, I would have thought East Rochester girls would have won this game at home against Gananda, a Gananda team that just lost to Red Creek. But it was Gananda with a 42-39 win. And then Red Creek hosted Sodus. Big win there, 66-22. Another big game for Izzy Wilbur with 23 points, and Jenny Easling with 16. Palmac goes on the road against that Aquinas team that beat Minders. Remember, Palmac beat Minders, and Aquinas wins 57-47. So, I got to say the Finger Lakes East on both sides, boys and girls, might be just a little down this year, but we'll have to see what happens in the next few weeks. Bath Haverling beat Newark 41-36. And then Waterloo continues just to dominate Hornell on the road. The Indians win 67-40. Allie Smith with 16 points, White Principio with 14, Jasmine Lewis with 12, and a great start to the season for Minders. So we're going to step aside for just 60 seconds here, and we come back. We got more. We're going to talk about sectional classification, so keep it right here. And welcome back inside the FingerLakes1.com studio. It's the Upstate Hoops podcast, and sorry for the audio issues we're having here. I guess that's what happens sometimes when you do a 9 a.m. Sunday podcast. I had a rough night last night. I don't know if I ate something, but I was ill. I was throwing up. Went to a friend's house for a little party, and I don't know, something didn't agree with me. I had a really rough night, but I did get in here. I'm dedicated to covering Wayne Finger Lakes High School basketball for you guys. You know that, though, by now. But I do feel better. But rough start getting up this morning and then kind of rushing to get things together. And we'll have to figure out the issues that we're having with some of our audio here on the podcast. So, what do we got still to do here? We got about 20 minutes left. We got to give power rankings. We're going to look at sectional classifications for the upcoming season. But I also wanted to just give some notes on our coverage this year. One thing that myself and our whole team, everybody that's involved in our coverage of high school basketball here in Finger Lakes 1, have all agreed that, we want to focus every year on the best teams. There's nothing. Early on, we would try to get as many teams as we could, and that resulted in a lot of lopsided matchups or empty gyms. The worst part about going out, setting up all our equipment, and doing a game is when the gyms are just, 20% full and just dead quiet. Because sometimes it doesn't matter how good the game is. If that atmosphere is lacking, it's just not that exciting of a watch, to be honest with you. So we're going to be focusing going forward as much as we can on the teams that we think are sectional contenders. And we're going to go to the places that are the most exciting. It makes for better TV, right? So as we do our schedule going forward, we're only scheduling 1 or 2 weeks out at a time here, so we can pick out those games that should have that type of atmosphere and should have the matchups between the best teams and the sectional contending teams. Not interested in 20% gyms, full gyms, just not really. And then another note I want to say is, our sponsors, we've been growing in viewership over the years, and last year was our biggest year by far. It grows exponentially, and even our first webcast in Newark last week had over 1,500 views. But sponsorships are down this year. Actually, we generated less sponsorship money to support what we're doing this year than we did the year before, and it's tough. Our goal is basically to break even. We don't want to lose money doing this, that's for sure, and we're kind of set up to do that this year. So we're asking for your help as a fan. If you enjoy what we do and you enjoy live high school basketball in the comfort of your home throughout the winter, you can support us by becoming a patron on patreon.com. It's patreon.com/FL1, patreon.com/FL1. Go there. Maybe you pledge $5 a month. Maybe you pledge $10 a month. Maybe you pledge $20 a month, or it's up to you. And then every time that your credit card is hit for that donation per month, you'll get a notification. And then after high school basketball season's over, if you want to pull that back, that's great. If you want to continue on supporting everything we do at Finger Lakes 1 and bringing you, important local news, breaking local news, weather, and, of course, our local sports coverage, which, I think all that stuff I just mentioned is second to none across the Finger Lakes in terms of local media. So, it's all free for everybody, but if you can spare a few bucks to help us out, it really would help us out. So patreon.com/FO1, I'd really appreciate it. And it will allow us to do more. Even just this year we purchased a new camera to add to our set, and we're a couple new tripods. We're always upgrading our equipment. We're trying to bring you the best coverage that we can, and always trying to improve and do more. And the only thing that's holding us back really from doing twice or three times as much as we do now is the money. And while sponsorships are down, I certainly do really appreciate the sponsors that we have, especially some of these longtime sponsors, Generations Bank, Dr. Rod Littlejohn. They've been there since the absolute beginning. For 8 years now, they've supported us, our coverage of local high school athletes. And so really appreciate that, and hope that you as a fan appreciate that too and support those businesses, along with Bill Cram Chevrolet. And this year, a new sponsor that we do have this year would be DeSanto Propane. And so, if you do use propane to power your home and heat your home, give them a shot. Take a look at DeSantoPropane.com. I know they got a great deal right now if you were to switch to DeSanto. So you can check that out at their website at DeSantoPropane.com. And then, of course, all the other great sponsors that we have that are back this year. We really appreciate their support. But as I mentioned, we can do more. And so now we're appealing to the fan, to you, the parents, fans, family of players who we spotlight on FingerLakes1.com. And you can just make a small monthly donation to us, and we will apply all that to our coverage of local news, weather, and sports. So it's Patreon, patreon.com/FL1. So, I said we're going to talk about classifications, but quickly here, as we're running out of time, I want to make sure we get our power rankings in, and we're going to start with the girls. New power rankings, new number one this week. It's the Waterloo Indians. I think that they're the best team by far in the Wayne Finger Lakes. I think that they may not lose a game this year, and they're our new number one. They might be there all year. Really impressed with Mike Bree and his Lady Indians. And Palmac drops to 2 from the 1 spot. Mid-Lakes 3. Marcus Whitman girls 4, despite a loss this week. 2 Penyan, who's down there at 7. So maybe the pollsters here may have overlooked a little bit there. But some good wins for Whitman as well this week. Red Creek Rams at 5. Of course, they beat their rivals, Gananda, this week. Newark girls at 6. Haven't seen too much of them yet. We'll get some more looks at them over the next week or two. Penyan 7. The Lady Lions at 8. East Rochester Bomber girls look strong. They would have been higher if it wasn't for that loss I just told you about previously before the break to Gananda, a 3-point loss to Gananda. And then the Minders girls are holding on at 10. I really think that Minders team's going to improve as the year goes on. Such a young team, but great girls and really showed a lot of heart coming back from big deficits in their previous 2 games. So that leads us to the boys. Let's take a look at the boys' power rankings. And yes, there is a new number one. It's Newark. We kind of knew that was going to be the case when they beat Waterloo on Thursday night, but then Newark came back and lost to Victor. Now, I can't really fault them for that loss against a strong AA Victor team. It was at home, but for now, the Reds are our new number one. Now, Geneva, number 2, Lions, number 3. So the good thing about Geneva, Newark, and even Whitman this year, Whitman's going to play Geneva on December 26th. We hope to be there for that one. Whitman's has already played Minders. They're going to play a lot of Finger Lakes East teams and a lot of crossovers. They're going to play Lions this year twice. But all this is going to shake out. These top 4 teams are all going to play each other. Lions isn't going to play Newark, of course, and Whitman's not going to play Newark either, but I would love to see Lions play Newark. You know that. But for now, it's Newark 1, Geneva moving up from 4 to 2 this week, Lions 3, Greg O'Connor's Whitman Wildcats 4, Waterloo drops to 5. They could have dropped further than that with that loss to Canandaigua for sure, but still believe that they've got a pretty solid group there, deep I know that some of the youngsters didn't have the best game that they would have hoped to have in that opener at Newark. Devin Felber, for one, going to be a great player. Didn't have his best game. He'll get better. And Joel Kraft, I think, didn't have his best game. He needs to get better. He needs to provide rebound. And if there's one thing that was glaringly obvious in that loss in Newark, was that Waterloo is going to struggle on the boards unless they make some changes. And I think that Joel Kraft is one guy that can provide much of that rebounding. And, they're not that big. Really talented and deep. Mike Hubbard's another guy that could grab more. He hit 4 threes in that loss to Newark. He's another guy that could provide some rebounding for the Indians. And speaking of the Indians, the Red Jacket Indians at 6, this boys team, I'm really excited to get a look at them this year. They're pretty solid. They're going to probably run through the West with a lot of wins. But again, much like the Whitman Wildcats, their eye is on returning to the Blue Cross Arena and a sectional title opportunity in Red Jacket. Wayne Eagles at 7. So far, so good with the win this week. Can't wait to get accustomed to that roster and see what Coach Bill Thompson has as they start to move into league play coming up here. The Minders boys with that one loss to Whitman, that was a bad loss. I tell you, 34 points scored on the road, and Minders is at 8. Gananda Blue Panthers at 9 with Andrew Gabbert and company. And then the Clyde Savannah. Welcome back, Clyde. I think that this Clyde team is better than we thought they were going to be. Jaden McKinney, D'Amato, and Cam Chance, who, I said last podcast that Justin Tootie Smith in Lions was the best athlete in Wayne County. I still think that's true. Cam Chance is not too far behind, and I'm talking athleticism there. These are two really, really athletic kids. Cam might be more important to his team though than Tootie is to Lions, but both. I'm really looking forward to seeing Lions and Clyde face off this year. It's normally the highlight of our schedule. Last year we kind of ignored it because it was so one-sided, but I think that gap is closing this year. I think Coach Preston and Clyde Savannah could surprise if they keep it together, keep working hard, and I'm looking forward to Clyde Lions this year for sure. No doubt about that. So, and one last thing too, this Minders boys team, what do they got to do to get better and have a good season? They're young. You lose Darren Miller, you're not going to replace Darren Miller. So some of the upperclassmen on this Minders team, basketball's not their first sport. So Griffin Heron's a good point. The point guard, he's all-league soccer player and looking to play soccer in college. So, but played basketball his whole life. He's as point guard of that Minders team. He doesn't have to be the star of the team. He needs to distribute to some of these other kids. He needs to be a leader. The team needs leadership from their seniors, not necessarily production. They need leadership on the court and off the court. We've talked about Jared King on this podcast before and, what he can bring to the table. But the team is going to win or lose with the progression of their younger players, specifically Troy Cabot and Michael Bogart. Now, can Michael Bogart be as dominant a big man as Darren Miller was by the time he graduated? Sure, I think he absolutely can. I think he's kind of on that path. But until that happens, until he gets more into that Darren Miller type of class, this Minders team might struggle. And Troy Cabot is going to provide a lot of scoring, but these kids are just sophomores. They're going to continue to get better. I think Minders' best years are ahead of them in the next couple of years. I think you'll see a lot of improvement. But the question is, how much can they win this year? Because that's another team that's playing in a tough Finger Lakes East League, a team that Minders traditionally competes just fine in. But then they get out of the league and they're going to be in B2 sectionals. So the competition level drops just a little bit, as Minders being one of the smaller Finger Lakes East teams, when they get into sectionals, always a chance to make a sectional run. So with this Minders team, I'm just looking to see improvement from week to week and maturation. No problem with the coach in there with Coach Prain. So just looking to see improvement. So quickly here, classifications for 2019 and 20. Wayne all alone in A2. It's really tough. They won 2 of 3 sectional championships in the past 3 years in that tough A2. This year it'd be really tough too. You're talking, East High, Pittsford, Sutherland, Monroe, Northeast Douglas, Wilson, and North Star Christian also A2 again this year, even though they North Star down a little bit with the loss of the Brown brothers. B1, though, that's the one. That's the classification that we really love, because it's just like Finger Lakes East postseason tournament almost. Geneva, Newark, Waterloo, Pelmac, Mid-Lakes, and then North Rose Wolcott out of the Wayne County to go along with Hornell, Greece Odyssey, Greece Olympia, Livonia, Batavia. But, looking at potential sectional semifinals or final matchups between Geneva, Newark, and Waterloo, that's really exciting. I mean, it's a long way down the road, but when it's all said and done in the Finger Lakes East regular season, we might see Finger Lakes East, second edition in the postseason. And we've seen it before with Newark and Pelmac in the Blue Cross and Minders and Newark in the Blue Cross. So, I can't wait. Gotta love B1. For sure. And then down in B2, as I mentioned just now, Minders, but also Penn Yan in B2. And they're going to have teams like Bath Haverling, Avon, Waco, Leroy, Dansville, Wellsville, and Rochester Prep and World of Inquiry round out the B2 classification. And then in C1, this is another one that's pretty exciting for us Wayne Finger Lakes fans. It's like a Finger Lakes West Wayne County mix with Marcus Whitman and Red Jacket. So they might not compete for the league title this year in the Finger Lakes West, but they might compete for a sectional title in C1. Whitman and Red Jacket, then Gananda, East Rochester, Sodus, and Williamson as well in there, along with C.G. Finney, but I mentioned Marcus Robinson earlier, the 8th grader, now 9th grader for C.G. Finney. He scored 56 points this week in a game. 56 points, 9th grader. Class C2, wow, Lions and Clyde, same sectional classification. Then you throw Bloomfield in there as well. Then you go down, and Lions is a favorite. Geneseo is usually pretty strong. Perry's in this division, Warsaw, Alexander, Letchworth, but Lions favorite again to win another sectional title. I think it would be the 20th, maybe 19th or 20th for their school. C3, South Seneca, Naples, Dundee, HAC, and Marion. Dundee might be one of the sleepers in that C3, maybe even Naples too. They'll have to contend with York and Lindenville and Wheatland, Chili. And then down in D1, you have Honeoye, and in D2, you have Romulus. Now, moving to the girls' side, Class A, you have Wayne all alone, and then you get down to B1, and you got Waterloo, Newark, Pelmac, and Mid-Lakes. And again, Waterloo, Pelmac, Mid-Lakes potentially meeting up in the postseason. Real exciting. I want to see these teams all improve as the year goes on, and those could be some really huge sectional matchups come February and March. B2, Penn Yan, Minders, North Rose Wolcott, and Williamson. And then C1, East Rochester, Whitman, Red Jacket, Bloomfield, Gananda, and Sodus. C2, Red Creek, Clyde Savannah, Lions, Dundee Girls, and Mackenzie Kratsley and company. And then HAC and South Seneca. Now, this is South Seneca's domain, this C2 classifications, but this year a little more wide open. South Seneca certainly can win another sectional title. They have the talent. They're not as strong headed into the season as they have been in the past few years, coming off the state Final Four runs. But this C2 girls classification is really interesting with Lions and Red Creek and South Seneca and Dundee. Clyde Savannah and HAC, and then D2 girls, Romulus. Don't be surprised to see this Romulus team pull it together, improve throughout the year, and make a run at a sectional title. So, heading into the year, we always think that everything's going to be down because all these great players we lose, we graduate. Kevin Korzenetsky in our broadcast on Wednesday pointed out all the great players that left the Finger Lakes East alone that are playing and contributing as freshmen in college this year. You know, whether it be Darren Miller down in Alfred State, Derek Saluka from Waterloo, trying to think of some guys off the top of my head here from some of these teams. Reed Patchett from Geneva, playing in college, I think up at ESF. And the Newark kids that graduated. So it's it happens every year where we kind of feel going into the year, oh, this isn't going to be quite as good as last year. But guess what? It always ends up being. Programs reload, new kids make a little name for themselves, and everybody starts the new season on a fresh slate, and we're going to move towards the postseason all winter long. And by the time we get there, I guarantee you that we're going to have some legitimate sectional contenders. And I think there's a couple teams in here that could even go beyond sectionals, but I don't have time to get into that this morning. Glad you could be with me for another edition of the Upstate Hoops podcast here on a Sunday morning. Connect with us on Twitter at Finger Lakes One. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Our audio-only podcast is available on iTunes and Stitcher.com and Spotify.com. Check us out on Spotify. Archived episodes are available at FingerLakes1.tv, and this podcast airs weekly on Sunday night on Finger Lakes Cable TV Spectrum Channel 1304. You can also find our show, live streaming games, and local news, weather, and sports 24/7 on the free FingerLakes1.com Android or iPhone app. We'd love you if you'd support us on Patreon, patreon.com/FL1. No pod next week. It's Wonderful Run Weekend in Seneca Falls. We'll be back in 2 weeks here on the Upstate Hoops podcast. Thanks for joining us.